And people did say, well, you've lost your mind. But I couldn't relieve myself of the idea. And I stayed with it, and I began to get a little encouragement. And I took a few trips over toward the eastern part of our state where there were Republicans and have historically been Republicans. And I got encouragement over there. I said, look, we've got to have political interest from both sides of the state if we're going to create a real party. And sure enough, those people liked my idea. And we were building then because Senator Howard Baker had been elected in 1966, and here I was in 1970, not seeking a Senate seat, but being interested in our state government. I was known as Winfield Who for a long time. No one had ever heard of me. Not even in my own dental profession had people heard of me across the state. But it worked. It worked because it made sense, and because someone was willing, and because this lucky fellow had such marvelous friends willing to help him.
Okay. And I want to point out that at one point Mrs. Dunn did tell you you were crazy. I seem to recall she wrote a good and bad list for you and told you all the reasons you shouldn't.
She did on one occasion. That was another situation. But when I decided to run for governor, one night we were having a little pillow talk. I think you know about pillow talk.
I do.
And she said, honey, what makes you think you could be a governor? I had never held any office. And I said, well, there aren't any schools to go to learn to be a governor. And I said, I'm a professional person. I've had a professional education. And I also had an education in business, in banking, and finance. I have a college degree in that. And then I went to dental school. And I said, I'm a professional person. I understand what ethics is all about. I said, I have to have the ability to make people feel they can put their trust in me. And I said, I've got common sense. And I said, I love people. And she said, well, that makes some sense. And that was good enough for her.
That's right. Well, you have some wonderfully colorful stories. I don't want to ruin them for the people who are going to read the book about your father back in Mississippi and the courthouse that he worked out of. Tell us just briefly, how much of an influence was the elder Dunn on your decision to become governor? Well,
it was a great influence. My father was an attorney, but he loved the politics. And at one point, when I was just very small, he ran for mayor of our hometown, Meridian, Mississippi, and he didn't win. Later on, he ran to be the district attorney, the prosecuting attorney, and he did win. And by that time, I was 6 years of age. And occasionally, I'd be downtown in Meridian, and I'd want to go find my daddy, and I'd go to the courthouse, because that's where his office was. And walking into the courthouse in those days, back in the early 1930s, it was fascinating, even for a little guy, to see the people who made up those who had come to the courthouse on business for one reason or another. And those memories stayed with me. I remember walking up steps to my father's office and finding him near a courtroom or in a courtroom, and I liked it. I just enjoyed what I saw. On occasion, he'd let me walk up on the 3rd floor where the jail was, because he would have some prisoner to interview. And that was very awesome to me as a little fella. But those experiences ingrained themselves in me, I'm sure. And later on, I went to college. I got involved in politics in college. I ran for president of my School of Commerce. By that time,
help of a lovely woman named Betty.
Yeah, by that time I'd met that pretty girl from Memphis, and she helped me on the campus, and sure enough, we won that race. And then life went on. We married later on, and I eventually studied dentistry and became a Tennessean. I didn't really know that I would become a Tennessean, but it happened. I stayed in Memphis to practice my profession. But I could never shake off many of the vivid memories of my childhood when my father was so politically active. He ran for Congress, and he was elected, and we moved to Washington. That was impressive. That left me with many, many memories. And so politics has just always been something that I respected. And of course, you can find all sorts of people, as you can in any group, and you can find the good and the bad. But I found many good people in the political world, and I admired many that I met.
As a relative unknown in 1970, you became elected the first Republican governor in the state of Tennessee in, I believe it was 50-some years. What was it about the political climate of that time, do you believe, that allowed that change?
Well, there were some interesting factors. By that time in Tennessee, by the year 1970, the Republican Party had elected a senator, a Republican senator. That was a breakthrough. Howard Baker was the first Republican senator ever to be elected in Tennessee. Over in Memphis, we had remained very active, and we had elected a congressman from the 9th Congressional District the same year, 1966. So things were changing, and it was clear that there was a different feeling in the air as far as politics. But the governor's office was off limits to all that change. It was strictly controlled by one group. But that group had split, and there was some strong disapproval within the Democrat Party that gave me the encouragement that in running for governor in that year, I might even be able to attract some Democrat votes if I ran the right kind of race, if I appealed to people, not just to partisan Republicans. And I tried to run my race that way. I was very proud to be a Republican, but that wasn't the driving factor. And yet I must admit, I was very anxious to win because I wanted to establish the fact that another party beside the Democrat Party could, in fact, gain the governor's office. And that happened. And I think that was a part of the historical significance of the story that I've tried to tell.
Right.
Because we've been that way since. We've had two parties, not one, since those years. We've had Republican governors and we've had Democrat governors. We have had Republican senators. We even have two Republican senators right now. But if things work the way they should, at some point we'll have some more Democrats. That's the way the system ought to work.
Right.
Competition. You usually get the best when you compete.
I'd have to agree.
Yeah.
Part of your legacy includes improvement of public parks, publicly funded kindergarten, safe and well-maintained highways. Yes. What do you look back on as your greatest accomplishment in those 4 fantastic years that you were in there?
I've been asked that question many times, and my answer usually ends up being, my greatest accomplishment was to be at the head of an administration as governor that never had one suggestion of improper conduct, that had a very, very sound and honorable record of serving the people without any scandal. But then to back away from that just for a moment, we didn't have a kindergarten program in our public schools in Tennessee, and I committed that we would have if I could be elected governor. We didn't have a department to attract business and industry on the scale that we should have had. Our highway system was reasonably good, but it had sort of slowed down, and things had just lost the imperative that they had had at one time. We needed more community colleges. We needed to help people who had substandard housing gain a way to have better housing. And we created a Tennessee Housing Development Authority to permit people who had a certain category of income to get low interest loans so that they could own their own home. We reorganized the way government operated. We created some new departments. We modernized a lot of what had been there, much of which has done a good job, but which needed to change. And I was the fellow who had the privilege of helping make those changes come true.